So we're going to look at the same three examples that you were just doing. I know you guys didn't get to the third one. So you've done f of g of 3 and g of f of 3 for part A and part B, and now we're going to add on this f of g of x and g of f of x. So for f of g of x, think about what you're doing here. So normally when you say something like f of 2, so think about that, f of 2, 2 is what you're plugging in for x inside of f. When we say f of g of x is what we're plugging into f. In other words, let's rewrite this problem. We want to find f of what? What is g of x valued at? So when we look at the equations we're given here, g of x is x cubed. Okay? Now remember, you want to find f of x cubed. You have that f of x is equal to x squared. In other words, f of anything is equal to whatever that is squared. So in our situation here, where we want to find f of x cubed, we want to do this, something squared, but the something that we're plugging in is x cubed. And then we simplify if possible with our exponent rules here. This becomes x to the 6th. Okay. Now, if we write this as g of f of x, this is the same idea, but here f of x is being plugged into g. So it's still g of something. So we look at f of x, and f of x is x squared. So that's what we're plugging in. And then we remember, what is the g of x function equal to? It's equal to x cubed. In other words, g of anything equals that anything being cubed. So here, we're going to take whatever we're plugging in and cube it. And in this case, what we're plugging in is x squared. Again, we simplify that and get x to the 6th. Now, we won't always get the same thing. You'll see that in some of the following cases. In part B, if we're going to do f of g of x and g of f of x, okay, so f of g of x this time is going to be a set, okay? So g of x is an outcome that we've gotten here. Okay. And so we basically need to think what we plugged in here. So in the g function, if we plug in 0, so we're going to try and write this set. So what happens when we plug in 0? Well, 0 would go in here for x, and g of 0 would be 11, according to the point that's in the set for g, and then we'd be looking for f of 11. F set doesn't have an x coordinate of 11, so we cannot write this set. We can't compose f with g. Okay? So now let's try g of f of x. Okay, so we're going to start with the f function to try and build our new set. So f function has an x coordinate of 1. So when I plug a 1 in here, what happens? Well, f of 1 is equal to negative 7, according to the thing. And then can I find g of negative 7? I cannot, so again, I cannot finish this. With those number sets, we would need to have sets that correspond really well in order to compose them. All right, so finally for part C, you haven't done any of the examples. So if we do f of g of 3, that's the same thing as this. So my first goal is to go ahead and go find g of 3. So off to the side, I'm thinking, okay, what is g of 3? The g function is something squared minus 3 times something plus 7, and the something I'm plugging in is 3. So we end up getting 7. So I'm going to come back here and replace g of 3 with 7. And so now I need to go find f of 7. So again, remember what your f function looks like. It's 7 times something minus 5, and I'm plugging in 7. So for me, that's 49 minus 5, which is 44. And then for g of f of 3, again, it could be written this way. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go find f of 3. So remember, f function is 7 times something minus 5, and in this case, that something is a 3. So 21 minus 5, which is 16. Okay. So g of f of 3 is the same as saying g of 16. And now I need to take the g function and plug in 16. So remember that the g function is something squared minus 3 times something plus 7. So I'm going to do 16 squared minus 3 times 16 plus 7. So that's 256 minus 48 plus 7. So let's think here. 256 minus 48 is 208, plus 7 is 215. All right, and now if we're incorporating the x's, we're going to go through and do the same thing, but it's going to be more generic because we're going to use x instead of a specific number that we're plugging in. Okay? So let's do f of g of x and g of f of x. So for f of g of x, remember our focus. Start with that innermost quantity. We want to replace this with the actual g of x. And g of x is x squared minus 3x plus 7. Doesn't matter how crazy or messy it is. That is what I'm plugging into f. So remember, make a note to yourself. The f function, f of x, is 7x minus 5. That means f of anything equals 7 times that anything minus 5. And in our case, 7 times that anything minus 5. The anything is this entire g function that we're plugging in, x squared minus 3x plus 7. And then we're going to distribute and combine like terms. So we're going to have 7x squared minus 21x plus 44. And then to do g of f of x, so remember, our goal is to first figure out what f of x is. It's defined in this problem as 7x minus 5, and then to find g of that. Okay, so note to self again. G of x is equal to x squared minus 3x plus 7, which means g of anything is equal to that thing squared minus 3 times that thing plus 7. So since we're using the g function, we want to do those operations. Something squared minus 3 times something plus 7. And the something that we're plugging in is that f function, 7x minus 5. Remember here that you actually have to multiply 7x minus 5 times 7x minus 5. So you should get 49x squared minus 70x plus 25 when you're done with that. Here you want to distribute the 3, so you should get minus 21x plus 15, and then we have a plus 7, and we're going to go ahead and combine like terms. So we have 49x squared, negative 70x and negative 21x are negative 91x, plus 25 plus 15, that's 40, plus 7, so plus 47. So that's how we do composition. So make sure you bring your questions about this with you to class tomorrow.